Daleks. I like my Daleks like I like my men. In metal skirts, good with a whisk and a plunger, and at least 20 years older than me. But there are qualities in Daleks that I don't like in men. Cunning ruthlessness, murderous xenophobia, and panicked ring-modulated voices. Today, I'll be ranking 23 TV Dalek stories. I won't be covering cameos in this video, so these stories are out. Finally, I'm not just looking at the scripts for the stories, but mainly I'm looking at how well they represent the Daleks, so there may be some fan favourites which are towards the bottom of my list. But without any further ado, let's get into my bottom 5 Dalek stories.
915 degrees. Compute time lag by a scale. 140.
While this romp through time and space might be incredibly enjoyable, the chase simply isn't very good. The Daleks are robbed of all menace because they're written like dim-witted children. It's hard to take them as a credible threat when they're defeated by a bag of D20s, Frankenstein's monster, and a giant scrotum. Not to mention the fact they can't even make a Doctor Who action figure.
They will be invincible! The Daleks will rule the universe!
The idea of the Daleks having a beautifully elegant mortal enemy is wonderful, but unfortunately, they're just written as idiots again in this one. Their own creator, Terry Nation, robs them of their organic intuition, which logically means the Daleks don't hate anymore, and that's an essential part of their makeup. The other problem is they are pushed into the background by Davros, who spends much of this story wobbling around and speaking like he is very drunk. Okay, before I enrage anyone too much, is it a darkly entertaining and witty script? Yes. Is it a biting satire on consumerism, our obsession with death, the funeral industry? Yes. Is it a total rip-off of The Loved One by Evil and War? No comment. But is it a good Dalek story? No. They're playing second fiddle to Davros here is the worst it ever gets, and the only Daleks with any autonomy are the ones who turn up as a Deus Ex Machina at the end and whisk Davros off, which then robs the Doctor of what he's meant to do in defeating Davros. So, to put that another way, the Daleks defeat Davros, and the Doctor just lets them get away. Someone involved in writing this story really did not like Colin Baker's Doctor.
It's okay, it's just people in here. It's just people.
It's the nano cloud, it's altering your perception. Look again. Those aren't people.
A fascinating concept of what happens when Daleks go wrong is kind of spoiled by a lack of logic in the plot. The Daleks can just blow up the planet all along to get rid of the undesirable diseased ones, so why don't they? Why do they send their mortal enemy in there? Plus, the classic models are kind of overlooked in favour of the new series ones, despite all the pre-publicity being about their story featuring every Dalek ever. It is a good start to the mystery of Clara, and also the idea that you can turn into a Dalek through a virus is a natural extension of what we've seen Daleks do over the 80s and the new series. It's just a shame that when the Daleks forget who the Doctor is, another great concept is wasted when that's just fixed later.
You will never defeat us, Doctor. We will return. We will return.
Look, call me crazy, but I actually quite like the Paradigm Daleks, or as I like to call them, the 5 Bennett sisters. But the problem with this story is that they don't do very much except shout at people. What deaths there are pretty meaningless, and the whole thing ends, setting up for a sequel which never comes. The one saving grace of this story that stops it sinking further down the list, though, is these guys. The Ironsides, Dalek serving tea. What is there not to like? But now it's time to move on to the Dalek stories that I consider to be various shades of average, with the middle 8.
Daleks.
Like all greatest hits albums, Planet of the Daleks is comfortingly familiar but hardly original. From deadly scenarios through to character archetypes, everything's a remix of Dalek stories that have come before. It does have a standout moment though, where the Doctor describes bravery as being afraid but doing what you have to do anyway, which shows how far the show has come since Ian taught the Thals how to fight. The original Dalek story sits near the middle of the list, not because it gets anything wrong, but because what it gets right is refined in later stories. This is the first time we get the claustrophobic, panicked voices that Peter Hawkins and David Graeme made so famous in the characters, as well as the Nazi imagery and their just insane xenophobia and hatred of anything different, all of which have become mainstays for the characters for over 50 years. In the wider story, we've got really strong roles for the regulars, especially Susan, and of course, Thals in leather pants, so really can't complain about that.
You saved the Doctor. Why?
He's a genius, and we can use him. The future of the Daleks might well depend upon the Doctor.
Taking this story out of its context leaves it pretty underwhelming, but if you look at it like a 1930s monster movie with the Daleks as the monsters and science gone wild, it's sublime. The humanoid Dalek set character is just a great evolution of the Daleks, as the title suggests, because it allows the intellect of the Daleks to be separated from their aggression until they stand on opposite sides of the argument. You've also got Ryan Carnes as a pig, Hugh Quashie, 1930s New York, and a musical number with Miranda Raison. I mean, how can you not enjoy this story, even if it is a bit silly?
Human female has escaped. I have failed. Female prisoner has escaped. I have failed. I have failed. Self-destruct. I have failed. Destruct. I have failed. Destruct.
Okay, something about my little fandom heart. This is my favourite Dalek livery, my favourite colour scheme. But also, they're incredibly scheming and clever in this story. They're robbed of power for the first half of it, and they still manage to take control of the situation. Even with rudimentary weapons, they're a force to be reckoned with, unless you confront them with sand, or an escaped prisoner, or a crowd, or tiled floors. But it's still good, I really like this one.
What is happening? We are being attacked. The Supreme Dalek wishes us destroyed.
It's a mindless action romp and the Daleks have about 17 different schemes going, but this story re-envisions them as a slick commando force playing a chessboard of objectives. What's really great though is that Davros and the Daleks are given equal time, which makes the power play between the Creator and the Supreme actually tense.
Doctor?
Hello again?
Will you help me?
Oui?
The new series have just given us giant Dalek battles in the Time War and the Siege of Trenzalore, so this story is a welcome change of pace. Rusty the Dalek is struggling with what it means for a Dalek to be compassionate, and the Doctor is wondering whether he's actually a good man. This moral ambivalence kind of mirrors the first time we met a Dalek in the new series, where the Doctor suddenly realised that maybe they weren't as different as he would like to think. It's really a captivating story, and with no easy answers by the time the credits roll.
Destroy the TARDIS! Destroy it!
This story really is a bit of a mess, and despite the fact it's in the middle of this list, I wouldn't really call it an average Dalek story at all. We see the Daleks at home rather than out conquering the universe, and the main focus of the story is conversations between Davros and the Doctor. But they're talking about Dalek nature, and through these discussions, and the Doctor's solution to the problem, we're really given an insight not only into the characters, but the relationship between the Doctor and the Daleks, and how that might change in the future.
You would destroy the Cybermen with 4 Daleks. We would destroy the Cybermen with 1 Dalek. You are superior in only one respect.
What is that?
You are better at dying.
Daleks vs Cybermen is a concept that Doctor Who had avoided showing on screen, and here the Cybermen invasion is hijacked by the Daleks, which gives us memorable scenes like cyborgs throwing shade at each other and a clown car full of Daleks filling the sky. But what most people remember this story for is an ending that, for many, has never been topped. But speaking of tops, here's the top 10.
They knew about me, these...
They gave us likenesses.
What could I do? They said my daughter would die.
What are they called, these creatures?
Doctor! Now do you understand?
This story was meant to destroy the Daleks once and for all, so it's quite fitting that the whole thing revolves around a battle of wits between the Doctor and the Daleks, and that his blind determination to destroy them almost cost him his friendship with Jamie. Now, if you throw into that humanised Daleks, new companion Victoria, finally meeting the Emperor Dalek, and a showdown on Skaro after hopping between time periods on Earth, and this isn't epic, but it is a bit uneven. Classic Doctor Who rarely included paradoxes in its storytelling, but this one may be familiar to viewers who enjoy the Terminator series, except Doctor Who got there 10 years earlier. Now, the Dalek voices leave a bit to be desired, and as you can see, there's 3 of them here, and there's very obviously 3 of them in the story as well. But what makes this story work so well is that we see the effect Daleks have had on Earth and humanity. And indeed, humanity manages to win in the end by resisting in a way that the Daleks can't understand.
Rose, Captain, this is the Emperor of the Daleks.
You destroyed us, Doctor!
Daleks were envisioned as a mirror for the worst of humanity, so it's rather telling here that they use our own entertainment against us. As a desperate Emperor fillets humanity in order to make new Daleks, the Doctor, Rose and Jack struggle valiantly to stop him. And by the end of the story, almost everyone's dead. And that's kind of what the Daleks wanted.
We are the masters of Earth. We are the masters of Earth. We are the masters of Earth.
Look, this one is literally iconic, and it's easy to understand why. This is our first Earth invasion story, and when the Doctor arrives, he's already too late. Earth has been invaded. So it's also the first story where the Doctor becomes this impossible hero, this great crusader, because as soon as he sees the Daleks, he sets out his mind to defeat them, and that is exactly what he's going to do. We meet so many supporting characters over the course of this story who give us an insight into what Dalek-occupied Earth is like. Most of them are fighting against the Daleks, but some are even collaborating with them. But for each person you meet, you understand their motivation and you understand what they're thinking. Finally, this story also writes out our first regular cast member, which would go on to become the way the show renews itself.
Activate planetary alignment field! Universal reality detonation in 200 realms!
You can't, Davros! Just listen to me! Just stop!
The plan from the previous story is brought to fruition, and 45 years later we find out why the Daleks wanted to pilot Earth around the universe. Davros is back, but his influence is extremely limited because he's a prisoner. The Daleks, for their own part, are showing their Nazi roots, marching people into death machines down the street, and they finally all decided that if they can't rule the universe, they'll just destroy it. But there's a Dalek who has laid traps within traps, and the ending just leaves you reeling.
I'm begging you, don't kill him. You didn't kill me.
But why not? Why are you alive? My function is to kill. What am I? What am I?
Bringing back the Daleks for a modern audience was never going to be easy, but this story manages to give them back their menace after decades of tired jokes about stairs. What is so remarkable here is, much like the first story limiting the Daleks to a single city, this limits us to a single Dalek, who still manages to kill over 200 people. But just when we think we can't be any more surprised, the Dalek develops compassion and hates itself so much that it has to destroy itself. Now this tension of Daleks feeling compassion and the Doctor feeling anger towards them underlines how we treat the Daleks in the new series, and it all starts here. For my money, this is still the best new series Dalek story, but it sets the bar very high.
Exterminate. The weaponry is perfect. Now we can begin.
Retroactively seen as the beginning of the Time War and introducing us to Davros, Genesis of the Daleks is an amazing Doctor Who war story. What makes it so amazing is that both sides have good and evil characters. We have sympathetic Khaled generals who we know are eventually going to become Daleks, and we have sadistic Thal guards, where previously Thals have been pacifists and people that we empathise with. That makes the Doctor's decision about whether to destroy the Daleks before they're even created a real moral quandary. And while he feels at the end of the story that he has changed nothing, throughout the rest of the classic series, the Daleks are never a bigger threat as they were before, so who knows, maybe something did change.
Operate, I obey. We obey.
After a one-episode teaser in which the Doctor is absent and every human character is killed, it's a 12-episode chase across time and space when the Doctor steals a battery from the Daleks. Now, there is no way that this story, which pauses for a Christmas comedy episode halfway through, should work. And yet it sings. I think what works so well is the fact that the format of the chase is revitalised here. The Daleks are given their menace back, and they jostle for power with the human villain Marvick Chen, who's just amazing. The death toll is also another thing which makes it so good, with several of the Doctor's friends dying along the way, and then the final reckoning of the Daleks at the end is their most devastating yet.
Small human female sighted on level 3.
What are you calling small?
Under attack! Mission impaired!
The last Dalek story of the classic series is also one of their best, bringing home the Nazi metaphor to post-war London. A schism in the Daleks is contrasted to human racism, supporting characters have believable motivations, and their relationships are deeply moving as a consequence. The spirit of Davros is kept well in the background of this one, and the Doctor seems to actually finally be sick of just stumbling across the Daleks and foiling them as he goes about, and he's not waiting for them to take the next move anymore. Finally, in terms of action, we have Ace running around defeating Daleks with nothing more than a baseball bat. It's a really, really good story.
Daleks conquer and destroy! Daleks conquer and destroy! Daleks conquer and destroy! Daleks conquer and destroy!
Recently revived through animation, this story takes the cake. Now yes, it's about the first regeneration, but it also shows the Daleks at their most cunning. It's about the Daleks gaining power. Electrical, psychological, and political power. The Daleks hold a mirror up to us, and in this mirror, this time they see a weakness they can exploit in us that we can't exploit in them. You cannot divide and conquer the Daleks the way you can with humans. The Daleks realise that pretty much every human character in this story is out for something they want for themselves, and they find a way to manipulate that. They manipulate the vanity and the desire of the humans until they no longer need them and can just destroy them. It's a highly effective story, and one of the most brilliant scenes is when a Dalek, genuinely confused, asks, "Why do human beings kill other human beings?" Daleks don't do that. Except when they do. There you have it. That's how I rank the Dalek stories, but what do you think? Is Revelation of the Daleks number 1? Is Power of the Daleks actually terrible? Have your say down below, and check out my video here where I go through all those minor appearances of Daleks that I've left out of this video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe so you can never miss an episode of Doctor Who in 10 seconds. But until next time, may you get your power. May you get your power. May you get your power!